Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Your Individual Wedding. Thank you so much for your feedback on our interview with Masara. I know that it really resonated with a lot of you and inspired many more of you to really go for what you want with regards to your interfaith wedding. Today we're talking to Ewan and Greg. Now, Ewan and Greg are first and foremost a fantastic couple. I always love an excuse to catch up with them. But they are a fantastic example of how to really incorporate all of your personality, all of your background, all of your cultural references into your wedding and make the day your own. Their wedding had everything from drag queens to Ceilidh bands. There was references to Ewan's Scottish heritage, Greg's American and Jewish heritage. There were elements of Harry Potter in the wedding ceremony. It really did have so much personality and, most of all, so much joy involved in the day. So we thought, who better to interview about their experience of planning a wedding than Ewan and Greg. It was really interesting to catch up with these guys and discover what challenges they met and overcame as they planned their totally unique wedding, if they had any regrets or would do anything differently, and of course what advice they have for you guys who are in the midst of wedding planning yourselves. So it's another fantastically inspirational episode where we're talking to a real life couple who have been there, done it, and got the t-shirt. There's also a really interesting story about a rather wet and soggy best man. So it's time to sit down, chill out, switch off all your social media, and tune in to another inspiring episode of Your Individual Wedding. Over to Ewan and Greg. Morning, guys. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast to talk about your awesome wedding day. Can you just introduce yourselves first of all and let us know who we're chatting to?
I'm Greg Diamond.
And I'm Ewan Watson.
Fantastic. And you've kept your surnames, but you are a happily married couple, isn't that correct?
Yeah, we are coming up for our third anniversary.
Fantastic. And obviously I photographed your wedding, so I know all that went on, and I loved your wedding because it had so much of both of you in it. So it was just such a great celebration of all your different cultures and inputs and nationalities. So I thought it's a really nice one to talk about because most of our listeners are planning their wedding at the moment, and we try and make sure that whatever information and advice we share sort of applies to everyone, especially gay couples or couples that aren't planning a sort of a traditional stereotypical wedding that everyone seems to think of. So I think your story would be quite inspirational and hopefully give people sort of incentive or permission, I think, to go away and do what they really want, because I think that was something that really sort of stood out, is that you went and really made it your own.
Well, we loved it. We had a great time. It was such a fun day.
Yeah, it was amazing, and you can see in all the photos all the different expressions and smiles and everything like that. It was easy to find lots of things to photograph.
Obviously I haven't met you guys in person, but I've seen the photos that Ross took of your wedding day, and one of the things I have to say is they always make me smile. When I see the photos of the two of you celebrating your day, it just brings a huge smile to my face. So there was obviously a lot of joy because it just comes through in the photography. So
it was a lot of fun, and it was such a bright day as well. Everything's so vivid and colourful in the photos. Ross did such a wonderful job.
Yeah, Ross was really great with capturing all of those images and smiles. So.
But like I said, there was a lot of colour and sort of everyone was really animated, weren't they? There weren't sort of any guests that, you know, everywhere I looked, some people were smiling or laughing or having fun or dancing, whereas some weddings, you end up capturing loads of photos of certain groups of people because they're the ones being animated, and another groups are sort of sat there not doing a lot or not looking very happy. But with you, everywhere I turned, everyone was having such a great time, which was so nice to.
I think it was a busy day, but it was kind of, I think that kept the energy up.
Yeah, definitely.
Could I possibly take you back to the start? I feel like there should be some dramatic music here. To the start of your relationship. Could you tell us how you met?
Yeah. So, well, I'm originally from the United States, and we met in 2007 at the wedding of one of my best girlfriends who's from the US, and she had spent some time. Was it in 2004, 2005?
Yeah, 2004, 2005, we worked together in London.
So she was posted for a job here in London, and her name's Heather, and she and Ewan worked together on some work projects, and then we subsequently met at Heather and her partner Jocelyn's wedding in New York.
I worked with Jocelyn as well. I worked with both of them in London.
And then, I mean, we really met briefly, but then about a year later in 2008, that was around that time when everyone was starting to meet up on Facebook and connect with friends. And Heather said, remember that guy that you thought was cute at my wedding? He just sent us a friend request. So I sent Ewan a friend request, and, we kind of became pen pals through Messenger for about a year. And then in 2009, and we kept saying, like, you should come visit the girls and I in DC. And he would say, you should come over to London. And then in 2009, I came for a visit, and
here we are. Well, not quite. We had 7 years of long distance. So we were back and forward from London to New York for a long time. So lots of flights. And I looked at moving to New York at one point, but struggled with jobs and visas. And then we kind of put that to one side and rethought it. And Greg was able to get a transfer with his job, so moved over here.
Brilliant. That's a huge commitment though, isn't it? It's a long, because I was 3 hours from my partner, so I considered that long distance, going down on the train across the country. But like from, it's a 7-hour flight or however long it was, it's a huge commitment, isn't it, really? You can't just sort of see how it goes or sort of pop and see each other on the off chance and take it as it comes. You kind of have to, there's a lot of planning involved to
there is
make it work.
You don't start it thinking it's going to be 7 years though.
No, that's true.
Yeah. I also think that may have lent to like the great time that people were having at the wedding, because I think they were just so happy that
we got there.
We got there in the end.
Relief at last. Celebrate this wedding. Excellent.
So who was it that proposed to who? I know where it took place because I know we did your engagement shoot at the place where the proposal took place, but if you could just share your proposal story, that would be fab.
Yeah, I proposed to Greg. It was just before Christmas.
Christmas Eve.
It was at Kenwood's house on Hampstead Heath. There's a point there which has this amazing panoramic view just over the whole of London. We live quite close to Hampstead Heath, so I go up there a lot for walks. So it was kind of a point we'd been to. It's a very popular point in terms of just seeing the view. So it was there.
And were you expecting it, Greg, or was it a total surprise? Or
yeah, no, I was not expecting it. It was a big surprise. I mean, he got down on one knee and
on the wet grass,
pulled out a ring. I found out afterwards. I think I had said half jokingly that you should speak to my parents, and he actually did call and
oh wow.
He spoke to my
proper traditional
dad, or you called both of my parents,
both of them.
He spoke to them. It was also funny because about 10 minutes before he proposed, like when we would talk about making plans and being together, and I would say like I want to get a dog, and Ewan's would traditionally be opposed to that. But about 10 minutes before he proposed, like out of the blue, he said, I would be up for getting a dog one day. And I didn't think anything of it. I mean, I thought it was a little bit strange, but then a few hours afterwards, I was like, wait, were you worried that I was going to say no if you didn't want a dog?
I love that. Got to throw a few sort of gambling chips in there as well, just to make sure.
You're right.
That's lovely. So did you, Ross and I have spoken about proposals in the past and whether people prefer to propose in a public way or in a private way. Did you, Ewan, have it planned out, or was it just kind of like you were somewhere, it meant a lot to you and it happened? Or was there?
I had it planned out in the extent that I wanted to do it. My friend Alice had been ring shopping with me to help. I got wedding rings, which I thought we'd wear on the other hand. So I got 2 rings for the proposal, and Alice had helped do that. So I kind of knew I wanted to. The exact timing I wasn't sure of. It just kind of worked out. And then we ended up, we each lost those rings. So we had to buy 2 rings for the wedding.
Oh my goodness. So how did you lose the rings? What happened? You both lost the rings?
Yeah,
yes,
yours fell off, right?
Mine fell off. I was in New York. I'm still living in New York, and somewhere in transit, either on a bus or a subway. And I tried filing lost claim forms, and it just never.
And mine was at the gym. I left it in the locker for like 3 minutes, and I went, "Oh, I've left my ring." Went back, and someone had taken it.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh,
but we got nice new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah. Cool. So you got your new rings. So I suppose So your experience of planning a wedding as a gay couple. Did you find that any suppliers treated you differently, or were there any sort of assumptions from suppliers about how your day should or would pan out? Did you, how was your general experience of planning your wedding?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in terms of suppliers, I think it was probably similar to, like, doors weren't closed in our face, as a gay couple. So
we never experienced that.
I would say that, like, we weren't refused the wedding cake, that, like,
no,
those types of, infamous cases. So I think in that respect, things have changed to the extent that we had this similar treatment that a straight couple would have. But I think there's some nuance that suppliers, like use of language, hasn't fully adapted.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were looking at some venues. I had very little. It turned out, had very little patience for it. We were at one venue, and this person who was showing us around just kept saying bride and bridal party repeatedly, and I just got to the point when
even when you were there in front of them,
in front of her, being taken around, and she just could not stop saying bridal party. I just got to the point where I said, look, enough. You've got to stop saying this. We're not brides.
Didn't she was pointing out, like, where the bridal suite would be?
Yeah.
And we were like, what about this doesn't add up? It was kind of like, that was her.
That was the first time I kind of said something, and after that I sort of had a zero tolerance approach to it.
Yeah.
Immediately correct people.
Which is fair enough, I think.
But I think the whole industry is geared up towards straight couples. We went to a number of wedding fairs, one of which was the gay wedding fair. I think you were at that.
I was at that one, yeah. I'd already met you prior to that, didn't I? And
that was great, because it was just geared towards, I mean, it shouldn't have to be this way, but it just was geared towards gay couples. And the big difference was, I remember we went to a wedding fair at Islington Town Hall, and it's all about brides. And it just made me wonder whether grooms are even involved in straight couples. The grooms are even involved in the planning of it. There was just nothing, really.
Or there'll be a bar, and they'll guys, you go and sit in the bar. Well, yeah.
I guess that's maybe what it is. It's a big day for the bride, but I mean, I was grateful for the gay wedding fair for that reason, because you just didn't have to put up with that. I mean, people weren't doing it intentionally. It's just what the market is, I guess.
Yeah, I think people aren't aware of sort of, like you say, just language and being inclusive, and I don't think like you say, they don't actively shut doors in people's faces. They just don't realise that they're creating that barrier to gay couples when they're planning their wedding. They don't see it. I think it's still, but I think it's quite good that you had a zero tolerance, because I think sometimes it takes that to say, this is enough. This is not, there's not going to be a bride. This is, you need to change how you're speaking to us. Because I think if people don't, it's just going to continue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's inadvertent, but we didn't go with that venue, but even at the venue we did go with, they kind of occasionally would slip up and say bride or bridal party, and I'd be like, no.
Yeah. But I think it is it's definitely a learning process. But I think, as Ross said, I think you're absolutely right to pick people up. I think language is so very important, and I think the relationship between couples planning their day and suppliers has to start off in a very sort of positive way. And I think if the wrong language is being used, then you have no hope of that. And I've been to wedding fairs where I'm quite recently, just pre-pandemic, where I was quite shocked that the organisers of the wedding fair still give out badges that say the bride. I don't know. It's the whole sort of labelling thing from the outset. This is the bride.
Just have more badges for people who don't fit with that. But the thing is that annoyed me about it is we're spending a lot of money with you.
Yeah.
Get it right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Did you have quite a clear vision when you started how you wanted your wedding to look? Or did you sort of need to do the wedding fairs to see what was out there and what you could or couldn't have?
I think we weren't crystal clear on the vision of how the day would be, I think, until we sorted the venue.
Yeah.
And the venue had elements to it that lent themselves to what sort of became the theme for the day.
Yeah.
And then things kind of fell in place, I feel like, and became clear, and we could focus on exactly what we wanted.
I think that's right. And seeing the venues was kind of a monotonous. We saw dozens and dozens of venues. We wanted air conditioning because some of Greg's relatives from the States were concerned about the heat and were quite sensitive about air conditioning. So that sort of limited where we could go. So a lot of venues we saw but then dismissed. And then the venue we went for, I didn't really like at first because I'd been to a work event there and felt it was quite corporate. So in my mind, it had that. Yeah,
you already got that
associate my wedding with work.
Yeah.
But Greg helped me see past that.
It's like when you view houses, isn't it? You've got to sort of see beyond what somebody else has done with it and be able to sort of imagine how it's seeing the potential, isn't it? Sometimes I think. And
some of the bits about that corporate space that I didn't like actually turned out to be the best bits about the space.
Oh, really? In what sense?
Well, if you remember, the space had 4 TV screens clamped to the wall, and I kind of came up with all sorts of schemes for removing them or covering them, but eventually we just used them and incorporated them
in a really creative way. If you want to share what you did with them, because it was amazing.
Yeah, well, so I think that we had decided we'd have a nod to our long distance relationship that, it lasted for 7 years before I moved over. And so the nod to that would be the wedding invitations would appear like boarding passes for an airplane flight. And that was about it. And there was this, it was a real stress over like the TVs on the wall in this venue. And one day it just kind of clicked, and I thought, oh my gosh, we can make the most of these TVs. And when people come in from the cocktail hour, we'll have them set up as like departure boards at an airport. So you'll go up and, you know, you'll have to look at the TV and see where you'll go to your gate for the flight. And, you know, we could name the tables after flights that we've really taken over the years. And, you know, like it just kind of snowballed, and we were like,
yeah,
that's amazing. Cool. That's really cool. I love that.
And for that to stem from a part of the venue that you really hated and that put you off, that I think that's a really creative solution. Yeah. And they didn't just have a departure lane, you did a whole video, didn't you?
But after it was a surprise for everyone apart from our friend Stephen, who filmed it for us. So I didn't even, my best man, after we'd had photos with you outside and cocktail hour, and then we got everyone back in, and I said to my best man, can you get everyone just to sit down and look at the screens? And he was like, what's going on? And I said, don't worry, just do it. And then we played this video. So we hadn't mined an in-flight safety video. And I had seen, it was a few challenges in pulling this together, not least hiring a plane, but how to do it with a green screen, but we managed to find a plane in a museum in, where is it? Brooklands or something plane museum in Surrey. And then after a bit of persuasion, I think they thought we were mad. We had to go down, and he kind of vetted us, and then he let us in for, I think he gave us 2 hours inside this plane to record this video. And I'd seen I never say his name correctly, Almodovar film called I'm So Excited, which is about a plane that's crashing, but it's a comedy, it's a dark comedy, and the first class passengers, the cabin crew drug all the economy passengers, and then all the first class passengers have this party. And one of the scenes, the cabin crew do a dance to the song I'm So Excited. So we decided to do this in-flight safety video kind of spoof about where you need to sit and like how the day's going to run,
pointing out, you know, where the bar is located
and where the loos are downstairs. And then that kind of ended with us breaking into this song and singing song and dance routine. Well, lip syncing.
Yeah. But based on the routine.
Based on the routine. We watched this scene hundreds of times to try and learn.
Yeah.
So it kind of set the tone, because people came in and they didn't know what to expect, and then it went down really well.
It went down amazingly well, didn't it? Really, really well.
I just think quite surprised by the video, but they kind of just, I think it was a big cheer at the end, and it just felt like a kind of pumping party after that.
Yeah, really, it kind of set the tone for the rest of the day, I think.
I think you were quite conscious of I felt like you were really conscious of doing things for your guests. You were really conscious of making sure they had a good time, and you always thought about sort of how they would be entertained throughout the day. Was that sort of a conscious sort of thought as you were planning your wedding, or has it just happened like that? Or
I think so, because I mean, but before the party started, for the ceremony, I had always had in mind, I had once attended a wedding for a friend, and she did it in the round. So she and her husband were in the middle of the room, and all of the seats were, well, I guess kind of on a square, but on all four sides. So all of the guests could be a lot closer to the couple and see the ceremony from different angles. And just, you know, I just felt at that wedding like, one day I'm going to do that, because, you know, when the couple is way at the front of the room with their backs to you, and you're just kind of listening, and everybody's kind of just like making chit chat until it's
switching off. Yeah, totally.
And I just always thought, I want that so that people will feel like they're really a part of the ceremony with us.
That's really interesting, because we spoke to a celebrant, Ross and I, a few episodes back, and she was talking about how celebrant-led ceremonies can be quite non-traditional in terms of, you know, we've got a blank sheet here, what do you guys want? And she'd conducting a wedding for a couple who were in the arts and theatre, and so their ceremony was very much conducted in the round, a bit like, you know, a theatre audience with the stage in the middle. And that actually struck a real chord with me, and exactly what you're saying there, Greg, that traditionally the couple are kind of segregated really during the ceremony from their friends and family. They've got to go and stand at a point where, yeah, you can't see their faces and you can't sort of really engage in their ceremony and their union because you're looking at their backs. So that's really interesting. I think, we
worked really well, I think.
You know, we could look around and see, you know, we could see everyone, and, you know, at any point.
I think some of the, just back to Ross's question, I think some of the other things we did, I think we did want to entertain people, and again, we just wanted to have a party. I think some of it evolved. I mean, obviously we had a budget, but we just kept thinking, let's do this and let's do this and let's do this. So we ended up with a Ceilidh band and a drag act singing or drag pop group, and then a disco. Like, bah, bah, bah. Yeah.
And you incorporated, obviously, you had elements of the American culture and your Scottish heritage, and obviously your Jewish culture as well. Was that fun to kind of mix all those things? Did it create challenges, or did it give you sort of scope to really go for it?
It was really fun to do that. I mean, the celebrant was great with that for a start. Julie Lane was fantastic. We decided to have Julie as our celebrant, but also get Heather, whose wedding we'd met at, to be a sort of co-celebrant, and because we wanted to have traditional parts of what you'd expect at a service with Jewish traditions. So Heather was able to do that, and we had Zoom calls with Julie, and then Julie and Heather together just to work it all out. And Julie was completely flexible and was like, whatever you want. And so it worked really well, the two of them together, kind of Julie doing parts of it and then Heather doing more of the Jewish elements.
They both really complemented one another really well, I thought. And in the way that they helped, I mean, Julie kept us on track with, you know, she'd check in, ask us for our contributions for various elements, and then, you know, Heather would do the same, and then they just really played off of each other so well.
And then the ceremony we did incorporate. So I'm from Scotland and not religious at all. Greg's from America and is Jewish, so we're trying to combine all of that. I didn't want any religion in the service, so I think what we tried to do was incorporate Scottish bits with non-religious Jewish traditions, which to my mind it seems there's quite a lot of them. For example, like the huppah, which is how do you describe it? The blanket you stand under.
Yeah.
Which is held up high. I mean, it represents home and building a home together. So I didn't want any reference to God or religion explicitly, but incorporating those sorts of traditions seemed to work really well.
Yeah, definitely. Was there did you feel any pressure to incorporate those from sort of friends and family, or was it all sort of come from you and what you wanted to feature?
I didn't feel any pressure.
I mean, we did want to include as many people as possible. So, for example, there's, as part of a Jewish wedding, there's it's what's called the 7 blessings, and they're, you know, normally they would be read in Hebrew, and they are more traditional and, you know, God focused on various aspects, and, you know, we modernized those a bit, and, you know, they were in English, and we just picked.
They weren't religious, they were just themes.
Yeah, just like
love and humor and home and things like that.
Yeah. And we picked different friends and family to read each blessing. And then the last blessing was, I think it was the blessing for community.
And everyone said that together.
Yeah, and so we had everyone who attended read that to us at the same time. So.
Had you been to? Ewan, have you been to like an American? You'd obviously been to an American wedding because that's where you met Greg. Did that differ in any way to what you were used to?
I mean, Heather and Jocelyn, where we met, set a very high bar, because that was a lesbian, Jewish, New York, Caribbean mask ball. Yeah, we had a lot to live up to. I think I've been to a few other weddings in the States before, but that was the only Jewish wedding I've been to, I think.
Yeah, Heather's was off the charts.
Yeah.
So there was no sort of culture clash between you from a sort of nationality point of view. There was nothing that you sort of felt.
I don't think for the service. I think the only thing we did during the week before, we had guests in town from the States for the week running up to the wedding. So we did events during the week. It was around 4th of July. So we like a barbecue for 4th of July. We did a boat trip down the Thames. We did a trip to a West End show. But then, which is particularly American, is the rehearsal dinner.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I kind of have been to them in the past in the UK, but they're kind of small affairs. But my understanding, the US tradition, the rehearsal dinner, is everyone from out of town gets invited. And as half the guests were from the States, we've suddenly got another event on our hands. We did it in a pub and it was manageable, but that was kind of a US tradition, I think. But the service itself on the day was quite easy to blend everything.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Looking back at your day, is there anything in the planning process that you think, in retrospect, you were stressing about, but now you look back and think, what was the issue? I mean, the TVs obviously is a great example of that. But is there anything that you were particularly stressed out about, and you look back now and think, what was the issue there? Why were we worrying about that?
I guess the detail. We spent a lot of time obsessing over detail, like table plans and where people sit and how the table looks and the running order of the day, and dealing with our venue, who were difficult. But on the day itself, I think we both said afterwards, you just got to let it go and just enjoy it. And it was chaotic on the day. I mean, the drag act turned up early and wanted to leave early because they wanted to go to a Pride event. And that sort of created, the venue seemed quite upset about it. And we were like, okay, well, we just got to switch things around. And we just changed the order of the day. On the day itself, you just got to not worry.
Yeah,
just roll with it.
Just go with the flow of it.
That's what I'd say is, I guess if you're planning a wedding, it's difficult not to get involved in the details, but I'd say ultimately, I think some of the detail helped and people commented on it, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. You just want people to have fun, right?
There was a we were discussing this earlier, and I just remembered there was one thing that was very stressful, was that our wedding ended up being on the day of the semi-final of the England game in the World Cup.
Yeah.
And to me, as an American and not a soccer fan, now I'm a football, I know that it's football, but at the time, like, that just did not register on my calendar of events. But remember, we had a phone call with Julie.
I was like, "Oh my God, we've got to move the time." Had an emergency call with Julie.
Was like, we need to move this time. Like, all of the guests, they're going to be upset and they're going to want to watch the game. And
then I spoke to a couple of my gay friends who are huge football fans, and they were just like, "Forget it, whatever. It doesn't really matter." And as it turned out, the cocktail hour was in most of the match. So I'd say about 20 people disappeared to the bar next door. It's like, fine, whatever.
Exactly. I'm having this in my life at the moment because my husband is a huge football fan. My son is a huge football fan. I'm a pretty big football fan. But yeah, every little thing in our diary at the moment is double checked with the schedule. Does it clash with the match? Does it clash? But you're absolutely right. People are there to celebrate your union and your day. And yeah, if they have to stick an earbud in and listen to the scores coming in, then hey, it happens. I'm interested, though, Ewan, you mentioned the venue not being as flexible as they could have been. What advice would you give to venues about making sure that they are being as flexible as they can be, and keeping those lines of communication open around being flexible and supporting your couples?
I could start with advice to couples, I think, which is just to stick with what you want. I felt we were talking about this in advance of this podcast and thinking back at the venue. I think they were very used to straight couples going in and having a wedding in accordance with their cookie cutter version of the day. So starting with things like Greg's idea of the service being in the round, we got so much pushback on it. They didn't want to do it. They said it wouldn't fit. So we went in and we measured out the chairs with them, and then they reluctantly agreed it would fit. And they felt we had too many things. I mean, it was a busy day, but they felt we had too much on. We ordered a cheese tower rather than a cheesecake and got it from outside, and they were annoyed about that. And then they wouldn't help us work out where to put it. And then there was other stuff they just weren't helpful. I just think they weren't used to having two
queens
saying, I'm sorry, this is the way it's going to be, and you need to accommodate.
I mean, when we did the walkthrough with them a couple of days before, we had our friend Amelia with us, and I remember the venue guy was, trying to convince us to put the photo booth right on the side of the dance floor, and I was just off on the side saying to Amelia, I'm not putting it there. Like, they're just going to have to put it where we want it.
Well, you get to the point as well when you worry you're being unreasonable. But that day I remember, because Demili was definitely the voice of reason, and she was like, fuck that, sorry, do what you want.
Yeah, I'm with her. Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. You're paying suppliers a lot of money, and unless there's a sort of a very valid and genuine reason as to why they can't do something, be flexible.
I think that's a fair comment, because none of the reasons were genuine or valid. They just didn't want to. It was inconvenient for them to have to think about a different chair configuration, so they didn't want to do it. I got to the point where I was quite irritated with them by the day, but again, you just got to let it go and enjoy it. And the person from the venue who was with us on the day was new, and she was delightful, and she did a great job. But running up to it, I just felt it was a battle with them a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So my advice to venues is not to do that and accommodate what people want if it's not unreasonable.
Yeah, I think hopefully sort of this, I mean, I've heard really different stories of how venues have reacted to the pandemic and sort of changing dates, and some have been great and some have been fleecing people and really sort of restricting, somebody's had a Saturday wedding in August and they can only have a Wednesday in November or something. They've been really limiting. But I think it has made other venues open their eyes a bit and be a bit more open-minded, because they've had to adapt, and you can't have a traditional wedding at the moment. So they've had to use the space a bit differently. So I'm hoping that does sort of make them think a bit differently and not be so, like you say, cookie cutter, because I think weddings have been like that for so long. But I also think gay weddings are helping to change that, because couples like you come in and say, well, this doesn't apply to us, or, there's no brides here and we don't want that and that won't work. So that they have started to realise that it's not possible. And it comes back from, not just being sort of beaten down and doing what they want. And I do know couples that have kind of compromised, and I don't think you should compromise on the one day that's yours and all about you and that you spend a lot of money on.
Yeah, I don't know whether, I think this is fair comment as well. I think my advice would be to think of as many things as you can in advance before you sign the contract, because every time you diverge from what they view the day should be like, they charge you.
Yeah.
So, the kind of things we hadn't thought, like bringing in a cheese tower, they were really annoyed about. So they charged us for every plate and fork and knife they brought out for people to eat the cheese.
Wow.
That's ridiculous, isn't it? It's so ridiculous.
We just hadn't thought about a lot of things, but at that point you're kind of over a barrel, and you want to manage the cost. You do have a budget, and
I would
it's
say
easy for them just to spring things on you.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's the first time for most people. It's the first time they've planned a wedding, and so it's completely understandable that you don't think of all the questions, because, you know, hey, you know, who would have thought if you've got plates in the kitchen, there would be a charge for bringing them out for people to eat cheese on. So, you know, it is very difficult to be able to sort of plan all of these questions in advance. But that's why this podcast and speaking to you guys is so fantastic, because it does give people the heads up and they can sort of take these things into consideration.
Yeah, like when the brochure says that, I forget how it worded the dance with dance floor, but we didn't think to ask if we just assumed it included the dance floor. We didn't realize we were going to have to pay for the dance floor.
It said you could choose options for capacity, and it was with or without dance floor, so how many people would fit in. So we went for the one with dance floor, assuming the dance floor was part of the price.
But it was,
no,
that's not good. That's quite underhand almost, isn't it, really?
I mean, I was being a bit kind of screw you by this point. So we intentionally got a dance floor from elsewhere, because I'm not paying them for their dance floor.
Well, the DJ had a dance floor, and it was less expensive, so we said, well, we'll bring in the DJ's dance floor.
That sort of thing was ridiculous. I was like, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah, that's not right at all, is it, really? No. I suppose they're just used to people going, like you say, going along with it or not feeling, and it comes back, if they've signed a contract, they kind of feel they can't do anything about it. So yeah, it's a good idea to find out as much as you can before, and not take things for granted. You would just assume that if you're paying for the space for a dance floor, they're going to include the dance floor, aren't they? And plates.
Yeah. And I suppose, again, you know, this is stuff that Ross and I have discussed in the past, sort of, you know, checking reviews and trying to find out as much as you can about your suppliers in advance of booking them.
Right.
So if anybody has had that icky experience where, you know, they feel like perhaps the venue hasn't been as open and honest about what's included in your package as they could have been, somebody else might have picked up on that earlier and reported that. So I think you know, with planning a wedding, it is a little bit of an unknown, and reviews and listening to what other people have said about suppliers definitely goes a long way towards helping you decide who to go with and who not to go with. But yeah, dance floor, wow. I've not heard that one before. That's a bit of a.
But when it says there's a you know, it said it in the brochure with dance floor. It's like, anyway, whatever.
I would have definitely, I would have been in the same assumption. So what do you, I mean, it's difficult for you to talk for other people, but what do you think your friends and family remember the most about your day, or what have they told you was their highlight, or the thing that they remember the most?
I think the video.
Yeah, I mean, the video set the tone for the in-flight safety video. It was so much fun to do and was so much fun to play. We were outside on the terrace. There was a terrace outside. The venue was on a canal, and there was a terrace outside where we had the cocktails. So Greg and I stood outside and just watched the reaction of people watching this video, and everyone loved it, and it was fun, and I think it was a surprise, as I said. And
that was really my favorite part of the day, was because no one knew that we were outside, and you know, and it was the surprise for everyone, and just watching everyone watching the video and seeing the excitement and the reaction to it. It was just like, it was like an uproar at the end. Yeah, and then at the end, just everybody at the end just like jumped up and started clapping and cheering.
It was really good. It was really good fun, that.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people said that in terms of what they remember the video. But it kind of was I feel it was an action-packed day. We did a lot. So I think other people have said, you know, it was just such a fun wedding. There was so much throughout the day. It was fun.
Lots of surprises, wasn't it, for people? Kept people guessing, I think.
The heat people remember as well. It was an incredible.
Oh, it was.
It was blisteringly hot. So
it was right in the middle of that massive heat wave that
in 2018
lasted for months. And then another memory.
I think Ross knows what's coming.
I know what's coming. I've shared this story on the podcast actually once. We have a section called Big Day Balls Up, so we get people to sort of share what what sort of goes wrong at a wedding, like funny stories. So I'll let you give your version of
We've
what
got a lot of mileage out of this.
So when we were before we were doing some of the photos with our families that you were taking before the ceremony, and this was about, I think, 45 minutes or so before the ceremony was scheduled to start, and you were positioning us on the edge of the balcony with the canal behind us, and my oldest brother fell into the canal.
Well, he was jumping up and down, wasn't he? He was jumping up and down behind us, kind of being a bit silly, and
he was being a little bit silly. Yeah, I'm going to caveat that. I'm going to absolve myself from.
I think I'm not sure. You know those kind of things you tie the barges to that are on the side of the canal. Did he not sort of land on one of those and then fall backwards into the?
Yeah, but he
fell backwards into the canal.
But I think because he didn't know what was happening, and obviously didn't plan it. His full body weight. I think he probably skimmed the bottom of the canal. It just seemed that moment when he fell, because our backs were to the canal, and you heard the like kerplunk of something.
It just like time froze, and everyone.
It did freeze. Time did freeze. It felt like the longest sort of however many seconds to see him again.
Was still, there was all this algae on top of it, and you couldn't see anything. And then Greg's brother's called Bruce, and Bruce kind of emerged through the algae like swamp thing.
Yeah, I can just picture his head coming up, and he just had this shocked look on his face, and you didn't even know who it was, because at that point you just knew somebody was under the water, and then my brother reached down and pulled him out, because it's deep enough that he wouldn't be able to climb out on his own, and some people were like screaming, some people were laughing, some people
my niece was a bit upset, and your mum was like, get him out, oh my god, and other people were laughing, and Bruce was standing there dripping wet, and we were like, well, should we take you back? We live not so far from the venue, should we take you back and get you some clothes from our wardrobe? And he was like, no. And then it was the funny, and then it kind of, because guests were arriving, some people saw it and some people didn't, and it kind of, the news of what had happened kind of got round, and people just thought it was hysterically funny. He was fine, obviously, but
yeah, and also it was so hot,
he dried out.
He just dried by the time the ceremony started, and his suit just happened to be the right color that.
To be fair, in the photos afterwards, if you said point to the one that's fallen in the canal, it wouldn't have been obvious by the time. No. Maybe by the smell or something, but in the photos you wouldn't.
If you look at the bottom of his leg, it kind of, you can see the trousers are a bit wet. But if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know unless you pointed it out to someone, and
or stood too close.
And then when he did a speech for Bruce and for Greg, sorry. Greg has two brothers, Bruce and Brian, and they did a speech together as Greg's best man. And Bruce pulled out his cards, and this is hours later, but they're all soaking wet.
I love it.
Because people kept saying to me, did you get a photo? And I thought, I didn't even know if he was all right at that point. I was like, I'm not going to, dash in for a photo opportunity. I was making sure he was. We did get one, didn't we, when he'd come out? And I thought, took a quick one.
Just dripping wet, shared with many people.
I mean, that photo has been pulled up many times, and also on social media posts. Like if we're, in the years since then, if there's a family photo and if it's anywhere near water, friends will comment and say, "Bruce, watch out for the water."
I love it.
It's a good memory to have, because I think when I recount it, people assume, like it was a shallow bit of water, or he kind of tripped, or he kind of got his foot wet. They don't realise that he was, like you say, submerged in the canal, and he disappeared for what seemed like an eternity at the time.
Yeah, it was. It was it was a big splash, and he disappeared.
Because originally we weren't even, because we were going to go across the road, weren't we, for photos? But it was so hot that people, by the time they'd walked across, it wouldn't have been practical.
Right.
And then, like you say, it was a football at one end, so it was kind of like, okay, this is the best place to do them. Not thinking
And he had been jumping up, and because I remember standing there thinking, I can see someone jumping up and down behind me. What are they doing? And then it was flat.
Yeah, I think because I can't remember. I think he was making out that he was behind someone and he couldn't see. So as I was arranging people, I think he was making out that he couldn't see above someone's head. And then he went up, and then he just went down and just couldn't see him. And I was like, of course, then you heard it. It's just, yeah.
Oh, bless him.
Crazy.
Yeah. What you don't know is that Ross actually orchestrates this for every single wedding.
No, I wouldn't. No way would I do that. But no, it was a great jam-packed wedding. It was really good, and I think your guests, I got a real sense that they were really rooting for you, and it was a celebration for them of you two finally sort of getting married and coming together. I felt they were really. I mean, you always do at a wedding, but more so there, it was a real they were celebrating with you, I think, as opposed to just watching you celebrate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to hear, and that's what we hoped people would feel. And certainly people have said to us afterwards how much fun it was. It felt that people were there, as you said, rooting for us.
And some of the dance floor photos, I mean, it all went on that dance floor, didn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, quickly, do you want to just quickly, before we go, just tell us about your first dance? Because that was a little bit special as well, wasn't it?
So we had at the gay wedding fair that we mentioned before, we had met a woman called Oya, who trained people for their first dance. So the only thing we did at that wedding fair, and it was the first thing we bought for the wedding months in advance of anything else, was, let's get dancing lessons. And then about a month out, we were like, oh my God, we've got dancing lessons. We better do something about this. And Oya was fantastic. And we did this mashup of two George Michael and Wham.
No, it was George Michael. Oh, yeah.
It started off really slow, George Michael version of the Roberta Flack song. The first time, was it the first? God, I could remember.
The first time ever I saw your face. Was it? Yeah.
Which kind of then
transitioned into I'm
Your Man. And I guess it's a bit kind of cheesy, and it's cheesy to have those rehearsed dances like that, but it was a lot of fun, and we had lots of fun learning it, and people loved it as well. So
going through the lessons and spending the time practicing the dance was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's funny stories even from that, like, practicing in the band shell. We went to Hampstead Heath to practice the dance, and there's this little
like a bandstand
kind of thing, and it seemed at the time like there's no one really around, like no one's gonna really notice, because we didn't have space in the flat to practice this dance, so we were doing it there. And in the middle of this,
there's a bit of it is swinging each other around, and you do a drop, and so we needed space, right?
Yeah. And so we're in the middle of this, and then all of a sudden this like military style exercise class comes running up to the bandstand, and they're like doing pull-ups on the side of the band, like completely surrounding us, and we're like, this macho straight group of people exercising, and we're like
with a little speaker playing I'm Your Man, doing you guys did the dance in the middle of it. And then they left, and then a laughing yoga class arrived who had booked the bandstand and asked us. At first she said, oh, don't worry, we'll do it next to you. So we continued dancing. And I'd never experienced laughing yoga before, but they stand in a circle and just laugh. And then they said, oh no, it's too hot for us, you're going to have to leave. So they took the bandstand, and we went.
So doing it on the actual wedding was a piece of cake by the side of it. You probably
it was by the time we got there, yeah.
We've
definitely done it with an audience before.
Yeah, that's true. It was very impressive. I've got a shot of Greg looking up your keel, and then the shot after is the expression on his face after he's looked up your keel, which I think is quite a nice sequence of events as a memory of that dance. But could you, if somebody asked you to do it now, would you? I'm not asking you, but would you remember how to do it?
I think we were talking about this the other day. I think
we'd need to watch the video and try and remember.
practice.
They're saying this to us, Ross. They
Yeah.
they know exactly how to do it. But you're going to ask them to do it on camera.
It's not. You haven't turned it into like an anniversary tradition. Though. You don't whip
No,
it
we
out
could,
every year.
we need to remember how to do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's on video somewhere, so we'll have a look.
Cool. So I think we've covered everything, to be honest. If there's any sort of parting words of wisdom you wanted to leave our listeners with, this is your chance.
I think just have as much fun as you can on the day, and don't worry about it on the day, and stick to what you want with this. That was the biggest thing in the run-up, was my frustration with people telling me what I couldn't do, and then on the day itself, just not worrying about anything. It's too late by that point. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, I would say, don't compromise on what you want. And if you have an idea that you think that you can execute, go for it and just do it. Like, make the most of it. It's like, it's the, one day to make it happen.
I think my experience that people will say no because it's a hassle for them. And you're like, I'm sorry, I'm paying you. Move the chairs where I want.
And then,
Totally.
And I would say just to enjoy it. Like, no matter how many details go into the day, like I remember thinking to myself, because in the week leading up to the wedding, we had all of these events for out of town guests, and a number of in-town locals joined for those events, and those were almost more stressful because there was a lot of shepherding people around town and getting them here and there. But when the rehearsal dinner started that was the Friday night, and the wedding was Saturday. When we walked in, I thought to myself, okay, it's now started, and whatever happens from here, I'm not going to worry about, if a T was crossed or an I was dotted. I'm just going to enjoy.
Or your brother falls in the canal.
I think that's brilliant advice. That's really, really good advice. I think because we always share lots of advice, but I think it means more when it comes from a couple that have, fairly recently been through it and experienced it. Definitely, I think couples, it resonates with couples when it's not always from suppliers, I think. So yeah, that's brilliant.
If something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. But like you said, everyone's there to celebrate you. So like, they're not going to notice those things,
Yeah.
Because they just want to have, they just want to enjoy the fun time and
Totally
enjoy, all the celebration.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I know we've gone, it's about an hour long, so yeah, it's lots of information there. So we really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You're more than welcome.
Happy anniversary when it comes round.
Thank you.
Thank you.